Hosep, peace, shalom, assalamu alaikum, konnichiwa. Tonight I have with me Brother Anu, and we're going to discuss a couple of things in regards to um, the black man being God. And um, one of the first depictions in theater um, as a representation of God being black was Green Pastures, an all black cast, and everybody in the film was black. The angels were black. The whole, it gave you biblical story, and everybody in the movie was black, and God was black as well. Um, And this was a time where, things were segregated and people of color in America were fighting for um, equal rights and um, being treated unfairly in a variety of ways in music, in the music industry, in the film industry. But this is one of the first depictions as God being black. And in this movie, as I stated, the angels are black. Um, Everybody's black. The Pharaoh is black. Cain, Abel. It just tells it's giving you an essence of a biblical story. And like I said, in the movie, everyone is a person of color. Um, and one of the things that I wanted to say in regards to that is, this, like I said, this is one of the first times that there is a depiction in the film industry. Um, and it's also dealing with the essence of Christianity. Um, and as I stated, the um, entire cast is Black, and it is from a biblical perspective. And, back then, a lot of the knowledge to many people of color and the average person um, from my generation probably has never even seen this movie before where God is being depicted as black in America. um, a lot of people, like I said, this new generation, my generation, and even many of the ones from the generation before me. So when we talk about God being black, but even back then when the films were in black and white, when television and movies and the entertainment industry was presented as black and white, a sense of separation. Um, and, back then, um, like I said, a lot of the knowledge that we have was not as, you know, um, it wasn't, as accessible as we have it today. Now we can just Google things, we can look things up. Um, but, when we talk about ancient traditions and when we talk about being deceptive, or deceived by outside influence, we look back and we see that there was, even back after the abolishment of slavery, and people of color began to attempt to make become successful in this new society in which they live with their new freedoms. And this was back when there was minstrel shows with the face of black and white in my grandfather's time, and that's how I saw this as a child. But the average person or the average kid my age at that time, when that I came up with, many of them um, have never seen this film before. And I think it's very important that we um, look back at the fact that there was a time right after the people of color in America obtained their freedoms. Immediately, even when there was minstrel shows and there was segregation, the moment they got the opportunity to, practice their own culture and traditions, you see here in the film industry where there's an all black cast and everybody is depicted as um, people of color, and they are all everybody has gold teeth or gold tooth in um, in this movie. God, the angel Gabriel. I don't think that God had a gold tooth in it, but it was just something that stood out about this movie. And I think it is very relevant that we do take the opportunity to appreciate. When they did obtain the opportunity with Hattie McDaniel, people like Hattie McDaniels, when they did obtain the opportunity to, and she's in the film as well. Yeah, Hattie's in there. She's in there. All the brothers from Stormy Weathers back then, the Nicholas, right? Some of those brothers, all of them are in this movie together, and it's really a beautiful thing to see um, the essence of uh, um, African spirituality still, despite the adversities and despite the chattel slavery being inflicted upon people of color, they still held close and very tightly to their spirituality. And like I said, the moment they got an opportunity to display it and depict it on film, they came together. And in this movie, you can see them depicting themselves biblically, and everybody's fighting over when God comes to visit. They're all, trying to get close to him, and it's a beautiful thing of how um, together they were back then versus how we are right now. I think that it is something that we should, even in, we have people in the film industry, and it should be something, even, I know there are people that are going to disagree with me as far as from the religious perspective, but, as I stated in this movie, they are depicting, the angels, everybody, angels. God is black, Noah is black, Moses is black. Um, Everybody in the movie is black, and this movie is in black and white. So even back then, which is very amazing, even back then, they had some sense of their supernatural essence. They had some sense of them and omnipresence in a omnibenevolent way. So it's a one of the first depictions as the black man being God. Oftentimes we talk about how, they lie and they don't tell the truth and people, you know, they're not being honest. But when we look back um, at, some of them who um, were able to, and like I said, Hattie McDaniels, when you look at, her, she's being seen in this movie which made her very famous, but she couldn't even get an award to the movie that she had was portrayed in Gone with the Wind. But aside from Gone with the Wind, she also stars in a film where, as I stated, God is black, the angels are black, everybody in the entire film is black, and it's a beautiful thing. You have the singing, you have these ancient traditions and this ancient story or this biblical essence and presence of these um, the African spirituality. So it's obvious that despite, like I said, the afflictions and the atrocities that um, many of our ancestors had suffered as a result of chattel slavery, um, they still held tightly to their culture and their African traditions and spirituality. And even when we look at agriculture and farming, that was also something that was embedded in them. So all of the things that they and the qualities and skills and the craftsmanships and the all of these beautiful gifts that they possess, despite the atrocities and the afflictions that they may have suffered, they still possess these gifts nonetheless. And they were able to, regenerate themselves and pull themselves together. And, it's, telling a beautiful story about, how they see themselves despite being kept out and despite being separated, despite being pushed out. And this is before way before Martin Luther King, um way before Martin Luther King time. So like I said, this is a film that they pulled together despite the blackface. This was, during Amos and Andy. Um, Despite the blackface and the, constant, the minstrel shows and ridicule, them being, you know, um, seen or portrayed as less than those of the white privilege, they still um, kept a sense of self confidence. They knew who they were. And then, like I said, the moment they got an opportunity, despite them being portrayed as slaves in a movie, they went outside of this movie as them being portrayed as slaves, and they came together and made a movie showing that they were, heavenly, angelic, the supernatural, the supreme, supreme beings. And so it shows that they were conscious and they were very aware. And at the time, despite, like I said, despite Hattie being portrayed in a movie as a slave, someone who barely could speak proper grammar, and someone who was seen as, less than. um, Outside of that, like I said, on the other side, they made movies to show that no, that's not who we are. That's who we're being portrayed as in a movie, but this is what we think of ourselves. And it shows that they had a very high sense of self-confidence. Um, and they understood clearly the essence of spirituality. They understood and they were very conscious of who they were, despite who you may have portrayed them to be. They knew precisely who they were. Um, And as I stated, the first time I watched this movie was with my grandfather, and it that was the first essence in my, you know, after that, when we go to church and see the white people thing on the wall, and it didn't really like, after I saw that, it was, he was my ideal of that supreme being. He worked, he took care of his family, took care of his wife, he took care of his children. He did what, a man was supposed to do. So and like I said, after seeing it as a child, it had a major impact on me. And I think that that's something that we need to do. Oftentimes in the films that are being portrayed with people of color, you see them as criminals. You see them now. Where Morgan Freeman, he plays God in movies, um, but this film in particular, um, you know, was a beautiful um, essence of unity amongst these entertainers coming together as one unison and letting the film industry and anyone who was able to view the film, letting everyone know that this is who they were, this is how they view themselves, and that's the Gone with the Wind stuff with the it was just a movie. It was just a movie. So um, I think that that was a film that had a major impact, and could have also a major impact. When you look at the society today and many of the generations of, when you talk about spirituality, and how they see the essence of um, a supreme power. Um, they don't really, some can, kind of relate, but they can't really put it into real context. So that's why I say this movie was very um, spiritual. It was a phenomenal um, unification amongst. And one thing that kind of reminds me of this unification, this same type of togetherness, was um, the Stop the Violence movement, with many of the rappers that were trying to send a message to the generation that was, coming up, and the next generation, were trying to inform them that, you were with the drug pandemic, and the drug situation with crack, and the violence, and that they were headed for a self-destruct. They were headed in a self-destructive pattern, and I think it had some sort of impact on society, to hear um, to hear that. And as I stated, people like Tupac, when you look at, you know, those who, rapped, and they gave a part of themselves to the industry, but then, there was a part of themselves who wanted to express in whatever way and opportunity that they, could, um, the sufferings. When you look at Marvin Gaye, well, as I stated, Billie Holiday. So when we look at the industry and the music industry, there were many who attempted to try to, bring some essence of consciousness to um, to um, to wake up the generation that had fallen. And one of the things that, like I said, about this movie, um, uh, Green Pastures, is, like I said, Hattie McDaniel is being portrayed as a slave, and someone who, can barely talk, someone who's barely capable of comprehending and understanding, how to do anything other than serve, you know, um, this is the role that she was being portrayed as, and other people in what other movies and at this time they too were being portrayed as doormen, bellmen, and it was a joking in a joking manner. And if they had to, if they were in films for white people, oftentimes it was something jokingly, something to mock black people, something to make them feel less than. So one thing about this movie was that it was very powerful because it was showing, like I said, how they felt about themselves despite of how the film industry and the entertainment industry attempted to display them and portray them. They came together and showed who they knew that they were. They understood that they were in this movie, you can see where the Pharaoh, he's black. All of these biblical characters and references to spirituality in their, um, you know, in reference to the Bible and Christianity, and because at the time that's what most white people, um, most of them were a part of. They were a part of a Christian organization. So this was that their, um, I guess this was their way of saying that, you're going to church and you praying and or whatever, but in actuality, what you're really worshiping is, you know, African spirituality anyway. But I don't think at the time, um, maybe it they maybe it they didn't see it that the white community didn't see it that way. I don't know, but eventually, like I said, initially they were letting them also know that we have knowledge of ourselves, we are educated, we are people who are capable of leading, we are people who are capable of coming together and doing something constructive and productive. So this was, like with no different with Frederick Douglass. And what they say about Frederick, he spoke very profoundly, and despite the ideologies and these theories of Black people coming from apes and monkeys and all of these things that they were saying, to, make the Black people, people of color in America feel less than themselves. Um, here was, someone like Frederick Douglass who could speak profound grammar, spoke it better than any most, Southern white men. Once he obtained an education, which, to be honest with you, at the time, that would definitely have, angered many of the Southern white men. That they definitely didn't want you to learn how to read and write because then would be able to perfect it, and then you began to speak grammar more profoundly than they. You could speak Old English better than they did. So, this was their way of saying, no, we are very capable. We're capable of, you think we, maybe you think that, maybe, because we've played in these movies, or we don't know what your ideas of us are, but they were saying in this movie in unison together is that you are, when you deal with spirituality, you're dealing with, when you're dealing with religion and, Christianity in the church, you're dealing with African spirituality. So really, at the end of the day, the joke is on you, and he who laughs last gets the joke. You know. So I think that it is very, very um, important and pivotal that we do, um, take the time for those in this generation to really take a look at, what, how hard, and meaning, we have the YouTube platform now, um, but before, there was a time where, if you couldn't be a part of television unless you were portrayed as what they wanted you to be portrayed as, and um, you know, within evolution and fighting for equal rights and constantly having to prove themselves. And no different than, talking about Kataji Jackson. You know, all of the ridiculous questions that they were asking. I mean, who asked, "What is a woman?" You know, if you really want to know what a woman is, you should have asked your mother. If you don't know in today's society who and what a woman is, then maybe now the question is, who were you raised by? A pack of wolves. That is the question. Who doesn't know what a woman is in today's society? And you know, why are questions that are not relevant to a person's job description and title and position, why are you even asking questions like that? I really don't understand what type of sense it made for the question. What relevance does it have to the job description? You know, it was just a total waste of time and you know, a form of interrogation. As if one is not good enough. And and like I said, why didn't he ask one of the senators that had been in office for 20 or 30 years? Why didn't he should have asked Maxine Waters what a woman was? Ask Fancy Nancy, ask Nancy Pelosi what a woman is. If we in a society where we have to ask what a woman is and we have to question what a woman is, we have regressed, you know. And I think one of the reasons that the question is being asked is because there's an attempt to redefine what a woman is, and with this attempt to redefine what a woman is, it just goes to show how ridiculous sometimes people can be and how childish, um, of people you can encounter sometimes. There are so many other important questions that they could have asked her, in reference to her job description that would have, make a difference. But instead, you're asking a question that my son could answer. So I just really think that but anyway, back to Hattie McDaniel and many of the entertainers in the entertainment industry at this time um were in this movie, and it was a beautiful come together. I think them coming together and displaying themselves as how they were depicted in the ancient times. So um, somebody somewhere knew something and had a firm understanding, and they came together in alignment, and to ensure that America would not continue to portray them as just slaves. They came together in unison and unity to show that we will not be in depicted as just slaves in the film industry. That is not, that is not true. That is not how we see ourselves. That is not how we're defined. We know who we are, you know so sometimes when it comes down to things in society, it's just some people, it's just hard for people to accept some things. And I think that that was the problem, that it was hard for them to accept that despite all of the things they had done to keep people of color and to portray them and depict them as less than and servants, depicting the modern day time of how the men and women, it was a depiction and a change of the woman in this new modern day society, versus back in ancient times. So I think that um it's a very, very um important you know film or movie that should be um, viewed by most people in the entertainment industry. and definitely the the young generation, to show that, you know, even before Michael Jackson, depicting Black people as, ancient rulers, um, because he was known too in the entertainment industry, and to portray the ancient rulers of powerful dynasties as people of color. Um, but before then, um, we had people like Hattie McDaniels, and it's really amazing, like I said, that this movie is one of the most famous movies in the world, if not. Um, that and what was the book? Harriet Beecher Stowe, Uncle Tom's Cabbies, or her book about what was going on, with the institutionalizing of people of color. Um, and as I stated, this was a film to show that they were not institutionalized. For them to make a movie depicting themselves as the supreme beings and the higher power and the angels, the heavens, the earths, everything, they were showing even back then, right after the abolishment of slavery, that they knew precisely who they were, even over here. So, it's a beautiful thing, as I said, throughout, times that have passed, many people have never seen this film. And when we talk about Hattie McDaniel, we only talk about her in a perspective of a slave. But Hattie McDaniel is in this movie and she's not playing a slave. Well, she's playing an angel. And I think the Nicholas brothers were in this movie. Um, it was a lot of people who were a part of the music industry, like I said, at that time. It was before my time. This was in 1936, I think, that you know, this movie was introduced. So, you know, with the film industry, as I stated, people, when you look at the film, some of these people, when you look at the movie, many of them were playing roles where they were being laughed at. They had to play roles where they were seen as, like I said, less than and slaves, and films that showed Black people only as slaves. And Hattie McDaniel and others, they showed themselves as more than just tap dancers and just slaves and just um, puppets. They showed that they were more than what they were trying to be portrayed as in the films, you know? And as I stated, the average person is in this time, this era, have never seen this. And this was when film wasn't in color, when there was no color, when things were black and white. We've added a little flavor now, but this was a time where before there was any flavor. This was a time where it was hard. They were harsh times, and you know, the entertainment industry didn't want to portray them as um, leaders. They didn't want to portray them as productive men and productive women that could, maintain stable households, that could, you know, uh, run businesses, that could be great, agriculturalists and farmers. They didn't want them to be portrayed as that. But this was their time and their moment, first time ever in the entertainment industry. With the music, they came together, all of them together. Entertainment, movie, film, whatever. They came together in this film, and portrayed themselves as angelic, as, who they really have been, generous. When you look at civilizations all over the planet, the contributions that they have made, despite the way that America was trying to depict them, all of the contributions that they have made, not just to this country, but to countries all around the world to help establish all over the globe. Who has been more generous than I? That is the question. With that being said, Hotel.